Well, I still have time to make another live. What I had to arrange has been arranged already. So good. I'm back. And for those who watched the 15-minute live I made before this, you will understand better what I'm about to explain in this live. This live is going to take a bit longer, of course. I want to talk about sacralized violence, and mythical characters. Now, I'm going to share my screen now. And hold on. Hold on. One moment, please. And I want you to tell me what this scene is about. Okay. What is the scene about? For those from the United States, you should know this. That's the only hint I'm going to give. What is this scene about? Tell me, please. I'll give you 1 minute to answer. All right. I got one. Someone said independence. Okay, but hidden gem. That's the name of the subscriber she forgot. I Rice is saying it's also inside Columbus, discovery America. Well, hidden gem was closer. This is a painting describing how George Washington or General Washington crossed to Delaware during the so-called Revolutionary War against Britain. Now, the reason I'm showing this is because I want you to pay attention to this painting, because this painting itself is painted in a ritual way. What is the first thing you notice about this painting? And also tell me some other stuff that you think are odd about this painting. Just empty your mind. What is the first thing you notice about the painting? And tell me all the other odd stuff, please. You get 2 minutes. I'll be back in 2 minutes. All right. So let me see. Now, Christopher says the theatrics are not needed unless they are pushing a con. All right? Hidden Gem said the eye surrounds them, but they may be normal. They made George Washington look very astute. Women held him to raw. Are those women? Iconic. Okay. The people in the background. Yeah, George Washington seems to be lording and towering over everyone else. Exactly. And that is what I'm heading towards. What you see here is that the United States government, they seek to justify the violence committed on the British people back then between 1776 and 1791. George Washington became president in 1789. Okay? So from 1776 to 1789, there was no actual leader in the British colonies in North America. I mean, the ones that revolted. So during those years, the British people that wanted independence, they committed a lot of violence on their fellow British people, just to secure the advantage they wanted. Now, the people that lived back then didn't fall for the hoax. But for the generations later, they need to justify why that sudden change happened. In order also to hide the real motive of why the violence happened. That's why they call it American Revolution. Revolution was a sudden change. And you question sudden change of what? Well, they were under British rule, then they became a separate country, separate union called the United States. Why did they become a separate union? Oh, well, the King of Britain asked for a lot of taxes, and those white men didn't want to pay it. Okay, but we're also Native Americans living there, right? And blacks, also, even some free blacks, right? But what about what they wanted? So if they would tell you the story, automatically you will find holes in the story. So they had to use visuals and sometimes even music to justify what happened. Because the present is an outworking of what happened. And if what happened was evil and wrong, that means that the outworking in the present will be evil and wrong also. If a massacre happened in a village, now that village is demolished, now they built another town on top of it. But when you go into history, you will realize, there were people living here before this town was founded. What was here before this town was here? Oh, there was a village. What happened to the village? Okay, what are we going to say now? So it doesn't matter how much you try to cover up something bad or something wrong. It will always show up. That's how the Heavenly Father designed heaven and earth. You can never successfully hide something that's wrong, because the earth itself is designed in such a way that it will always spit out everything you've covered up. And this is something that pagans understand. But common folks out there are so far gone in their head that they don't realize this. The Heavenly Father himself, when he created the earth realm, he installed the seas, the oceans, the rivers, the land, the trees, the forest, the sea animals, the land animals, the fowl of the air. And God created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. God did all of that, and there's one thing that God also put into the earth. The earth is designed to carry God's happiness. So everything short of God's happiness will always be vomited out from the earth. The earth is designed to reflect and carry God's happiness. And we as human beings are the carriers and outworkers of God's happiness on the earth. That's what we're designed to do. So anything short of God's happiness on the earth will always be spit out by the earth itself. It's not that the earth is a living organism or a living structure, like pagans say. The earth is alive in a sense that it's active. Okay? You have the animals who are living creatures, and you have human beings. The spirit beings are here to dominate the earth. And that is arranged in such a way that everything that falls short of the glory of God will be vomited out. So whatever bad thing happens, or whatever evil was done, it doesn't matter how clever they are, how well they dispose the body, and all of that. The earth always has a way of bringing back the injury that was caused into the earth realm. Look, if you commit a crime, there's a crime scene, and the crime scene contains evidence. The body is the number one proof. But if you say, for example, that someone attacked you and had to defend themselves, the medical examiner will examine the corpse and like, this is not true, because this individual was stabbed 50 times. If you need to defend yourself, you don't have to stab someone 50 times. Oh, and for example, there was this American guy whose wife passed away, and he claimed that a robber shot the wife and shot him, and he had to drag his wife to the shores, and he then ran away to get help. But the medical examiners figured out that due to the blood streaming in just one side of her face shows that she died at the spot where she was found. Or if someone robbed a place and they find footprints in the backyard, that's already a clue. Apart from forensic evidence, the earth is an electromagnetic structure, and electromagnetic structure picks up every energetic thing done on the earth. So every something is done that goes against the purpose of the earth's existence, the earth, quote unquote, records it. And that thing recorded will pop up. That's how the earth is designed as a structure. So the earth, our home, will always expose in a natural way wrong stuff that's been done in the past. So nothing that's short of God's glory can remain hidden ever. Now you can hide it from commoners for a while, and you can deceive people not to look into it, but it will always pop up. No scam and no con is waterproof, ever. That's why, in the case of the United States, they do not want to admit that the only reason those British slave owners wanted independence was because they didn't want to get along with Britain that wanted to abolish slavery, because the slavery would be abolished and they would lose their income and their relevancy in society. So they wanted to retain slavery, so they began to riot and all of that, and even began to attack other white British folks who wanted to have slavery abolished also, and they committed horrible crimes on their own people. Eventually, Britain said, okay, you can get your country. And then they had to quickly arrange a country. There were many riots. They didn't want you to know that that's how the United States really began. Because that would not be something appealing or something worthwhile to invest in. No, they want you to believe that there was this injustice, that the British public was victimized by the British government, and that's why, as victims, they had no choice but to become violent and fight back, and they won, and they got their sweet, big victory and freedom. And that's how they tell you the Constitution of the United States is very valuable. Okay, but if the United States won the war, why did the United States submit to the terms of the British Parliament? And why did the United States pay amends to Britain afterwards in financial fines? Why did it happen? Why wasn't Britain that determined the terms of the negotiation? And why wasn't George Washington involved in the early process of independence to begin with? Why wasn't he not? Why it doesn't just appear later on and suddenly he's the big hero? So, when you really look into the history of the United States, you'll see very quickly that the American Revolution thing is nothing but a hoax. It never happened. But they want you to believe it happened, just so that so that they can justify the present day administration of the United States that still has this white supremacy rooted in it. That is why. So the violence that happened is sacralized. The violence that happened between 1776 and 1791, that is seen as violence that you're not allowed to question. When something is deemed sacred, it means you're not allowed to question it nor look into it. And anytime a meltdown happens in a community, 1 or 2 generations later, they will sacralize it just so that the later generations won't look into it and be horrified by what they will find. And in order to achieve this, they will make up those mythical characters that were the heroes of the time. Do you follow this now? Let me know in the live chat. Do you follow me till now? Let me know in the live chat, please. So that's how it goes. The world doesn't want you to see that the meltdown happened because they couldn't victimize victims easily. Because once you realize that they just want to escalate for not being validated, you're going to think, are these adults? As a child growing up, you hear this, that people just escalated because they couldn't have their way. Grown men and grown women going in full rage because they couldn't succeed in victimizing someone. When you see that or hear that as a teenager, you think, I thought adults were responsible. I thought adults were honorable and straightforward and this and that. So the whole illusion of adulthood is broken down. And this is something a lot of people don't want to go through. So the world will sacralize harmful events that were done, whether it's slavery or whether it's child abuse, whether it's molestation of children. They will sacralize it by giving it an excuse. And the way they justify this excuse by having this hero figure that avenged the victimized people. Now, the public was not victimized. The public were the victimizers. But you have to portray the public as the victim, and now you need a hero that avenged the victim. So the public lost their mind because they couldn't victimize easily. And when they had the meltdown, it all escalated. It all went out of hand. And now, because the public does want to take responsibility for their own narcissism, now the historians make the public look like the victim, and they need to have this hero figure to vindicate the public. And then later generations are taught about this hero figure. And here's the thing, that hero figure, either he never existed, they just fabricated someone, or it was a real individual that lived, but the real individuals actually the main victim they were after. Because that's something fallen mankind often also does. The victims they've murdered, they will turn them into deified individuals. This is what the Catholic Church is doing. Where, for example, Valentine's Day is a celebration of a massacre in which Valentinus, who was a believer, was martyred. But the Roman Catholic Church now calls him a saint. They deify him as some type of hero. And they even have a whole day that they dedicate to him, the 4th of February, that they call the Day of Love. And they make it a commercial thing to make money off of it. Why do they do that? So you wouldn't realize, we are celebrating a massacre. Why are we doing that? So the real Valentinus, who was murdered, he was murdered, okay? But the Valentinus, or Valentine, that the Roman Catholic Church is talking about never existed. That is a mythical character based on the real Valentine that existed, but the real Valentine was victimized. He was a victim. The fake Valentine that they celebrate is a saint. to cover up that the real Valentine was murdered. So that, and why are they deifying the victim? So that the people don't have to take responsibility for what their ancestors did. Because people want to feel proud about their ancestors. They want to feel proud about where they come from. They want to be at ease. They don't want to face generational trauma nor generational crimes. So that's why the government always comes with those mythical characters of national history just to trick the public into not challenging anything. The reason I'm showing this of George Washington, because he is the easiest example for you to understand that this was a mythical character. And there are even people now suggesting that the human being called George Washington never even existed. But that the stories of Washington were based on several individuals, and they lumped the stories together and made one character out of it. Now, whether that's the case or not, I cannot say for sure right now. I'm not going to make a conclusion upon that. But one thing is for sure, George Washington, if he was real, was never a hero to begin with. Because nobody talks about the white young men that died in concentration camps after independence because they refused to pay higher taxes to the American government. If you guys remove yourself from the British Empire due to high taxes, but why then, when after independence, you ask more taxes from the public, which were far higher than the British ones, and you hid from the public that you were paying damages to Britain? So, the United States of America is a white supremacist shithole, a white supremacist stronghold to exploit minorities, and especially black people. And the only reason it managed to survive till this day because it kept on justifying himself with this hoax of the American Revolution, where they used George Washington as the father figure of the nation. And that's why they indoctrinate children from a young age into this hero figure, George Washington. Now, I'm not saying that George Washington as a human being cannot exist, but the George Washington they portray to you, that portrayal of George Washington did never exist. Do you follow me now? What I said about George Washington? Let me know in the live chat. So, the same as they did in the United States, they do in every country. So, anytime you have an historical figure that the government puts on a high pedestal, then know that there is some type of collective violence, some type of crime that the public committed that they want to hide. It's not a crime that an individual or small group of people did, because that will be exposed easily. But the public, as a collective, committed a horrible crime. Whether it's a genocide, or whether it's mass rape, or lynchings, whatever. And now the effects of that crime are affecting the present. And when people don't know what the crime was that their ancestors did. But the effects are still felt today. So when people feel the effects, they really want to know, how did this happen? And that's what it comes down to. People don't want you to figure out how things are the way it is. Just want you to just accept things the way they are. That's why you have those national myths. In mythology, the crimes of the masses are always justified. So, can someone tell me which crime of the public is justified in this mythical figure, George Washington? Which crime do you think is justified by this mythical character, George Washington? Let me know in the live chat, please. I'll give you 2 minutes to answer. Okay, I'm back. Hidden gem said abduction of women and girls. That also happened during the time, indeed. There were so many things wrong in the British provinces in North America. The last other issues were taxes. So to start a whole riot and revolt for taxes, that doesn't add up. There were a lot of white women taken advantage of in brothels all over the place. That was something that had to be addressed. But hey, nobody addressed it. And that's why you get the story of the Blair Witch from. The Blair Witch is based on a town called Blair that became haunted after a woman was so abused by the community. She had several miscarriages and she was exploited as a prostitute. And after she passed away, the place became haunted, so eventually destroyed the town of Blair. But in the forest near where the former town of Blair was, the paranormal activity remains. So that's how a lot of places at the East Coast of the United States became haunted. But you will never hear people talk about that part of history. No, they want to focus on George Washington, General Washington, and his courage and how he freed the American people. But they won't talk about how many of those same white American women were abused by white men in brothels. And if you have children, the children were taken advantage to also. Oh, you never hear about that. And they never tell you that because of independence, those women also lost their British citizenship. And because of that, oh, well, they had no protection at all. They won't tell you any of that. So, any mythical character of national history is there to justify some type of violence. That's how they sacralize violence. That's how they make certain events unquestionable to you. And that's why people who have knowledge of history, or people who see through the scams of history books that they put in public schools, they often are less socially advanced in the community. Because most of the people in the community, their lives are based on those national myths. They really believe George Washington was this big hero. They really believe America is based on Christian principles and biblical principles. They really believe that America is a Christian nation. They really believe all of those hoaxes that cover up the violence that continues till this day. So the moment you see through all of that, you are going to have some issues connected to other people. Because you'll be shocked even that a lot of people don't question things. And me, it surprises me that till this day, 2021, so many people from the United States still believe the American Revolution. Well, anyone else outside the United States can clearly see that the thing never happened. I especially am a bit frightened when I see black folks saluting the American flag and praising the revolution. I'm thinking, don't you remember during the revolution, those founding fathers had slaves, and that the Bill of Rights and all that didn't, and all that they put in this, all they came up with didn't come for black folks. Don't you realize that were black folks that were helping out to establish a country, and they never got the proper recognition? So some folks are just deluded. They invest in the mythology presented to them by society. And this is what I'm teaching you. When someone is not willing to see through the mythology, don't force them to see through it. Don't. If someone resists noticing that some of the stories they've been told doesn't add up, don't force them to see through it. Because they will go into a meltdown and they'll explode either in a suicidal or homicidal way, and then you'll get the blame for all the harm that happened to the community. So some people shouldn't even try to wake them up. Because how many of you have experienced this? You show someone facts that some things that was told in the media doesn't add up, and then the people turn on you calling you a conspiracy theorist, or they can become fed up with you. How many of you experienced this? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the live chat, please. Now look, there are people who just want to gossip, so they make up stuff to say, oh, there's something behind this. I can understand people say, then please cut it out. But when you point out facts, when you give them receipts that a report is contradicting itself, they should say, indeed, this story is a bit weird that they've been telling us. And also the policies they've enforced afterwards is quite weird. The timing's also suspicious indeed. No, they'll explode on you because you bother them. Because of you, now they need to face reality. In order to victimize, because they have to deal with reality. You didn't victimize them. You alerted them that they were being taken advantage of. But instead of being happy, they explode on you. That's why it's on YouTube. When I have loyal subscribers and supporters, that's where I make these live streams and teach people. Out there, I don't tell anyone anything unless the Spirit guides me. Because I'm not going to cost pearls before swine. I'm going to invest my pearls in the God's economy, and therefore I will not cost them before swine. There was no question, Christopher. So, oh wait, you mean the question I asked who? The question that I had no question about the lecture for you. I was just asking if some of you have been through waking people up and they turn on you. Look, apart from the American Revolution, the American Revolution is believable in some aspects if you don't look at the context of history. But then you have some national myths that are so outrageous that you think, come on, people, you cannot believe this. Yet people do. Now, look into the history of South America and this figure called Simon Bolivar. And you'll notice so many inconsistencies. And another spoiler, they don't know how he looked like. That's a red flag already, that they can't even know how he looked like. Simon Bolivar, so-called married a Spanish woman in Spain in 1801. But the only evidence of that the marriage ever took place was a painting made 119 years later by a Venezuelan artist. But look into Simon Bolivar further on your own, and you realize there's so many things that don't add up about this historical figure. First, they don't even know how he looked like. That's already, when you look at the paintings from Simon Bolivar, those are very different people in all those paintings. And you look at the facts of how things unfolded, it's also not inconsistency with the time period. And after this so-called liberation of South America, everything came worse till this day. Napoleon Bonaparte was sent by the Vatican into France. Napoleon Bonaparte was an Italian. He said that history is none about fables agreed upon by the masses. I'm paraphrasing now. He said it in such terms. So, that is why I'm telling you, you need to notice the inconsistencies of your community, because the inconsistencies in your community are the result of violence in the past, of public crimes, meltdowns, because it didn't have enough victims to escalate upon. Once you know this about history, you can explain all the issues of today. So, the reason I'm teaching you this, because I don't want you as a saint to be trapped by the spell of those mythical characters. And remember what I said earlier in the live stream. Those mythical characters, either they never existed and they completely fabricated out of thin air? Or the mythical character is based on someone who actually did exist, but they are portraying the individual as a hero, even though the individual was actually a victim of the masses. About Napoleon, I think Napoleon actually said it, but it wasn't meant to be recorded. Someone heard Napoleon say it, and they recorded it, and now people have it as evidence that Napoleon said it. Because what Napoleon said over there, it could have destroyed his whole government in France. But okay. So that's one thing you need to know when you're dealing with worldlings. Worldlings, their behavior and their personalities are shaped by mythology. Greek mythology is the foundation of how the world has been operating since the Greek Empire, all over the place. So, apart from Greek mythology, you also have national mythology. I'm talking about national mythology here. Greek mythology is about the paranormal. National mythology is about the crimes of the public. You understand that? Greek mythology is about the evil spirits, and national mythology is about the crimes of the public. That's important to recognize and to know. And that's why many of those national mythologies also have elements of Greek mythology in them. For example, on this painting, you see that around the head of George Washington, there's something like sunlight, like the sun, a glow like a dome of light around the head of George Washington. And you see him with one foot on top, another foot down, which is a stance point in Freemasonry. So now you figure out why some people will treat you like a hero out of the blue later on. Some of you are the victims of public violence. And when years pass by and the public goes to a meltdown because they didn't succeed in victimizing you, because they couldn't finish the job and get you to die or to get you imprisoned or anything or like that, suddenly there will be people treating you like a big hero, elevating you, love bombing you. Why? To cover up the crimes of the masses. When someone passes away, suddenly so many people have lovely things to say about them. While when the individual was alive, people were ignoring the individual or were treating the individual badly. So the only reason they thought good when the individual has passed away is just so that they won't be haunted by how bad they treated the individual. The same it is collectively. The government, with the aid assist of historians and social scientists, want to generate an acceptable narrative of history that will not upset the present day people. Because if people will receive a raw version of how history really was, they would recognize some of that same violence in their daily lives. And they realize, I want to be part of this. And that will lead to a lot of chaos and a lot of arguments here and there. And a lot of meltdowns also. So to keep the public at ease and conforming, they bring forth acceptable historical narratives in which they weed out all the proof of the guilt of the public. So understand this. Every mythical character justifies a certain accusation. The George Washington character What accusation do you think he's justifying? Let me know in the live chat. I'll give you 2 minutes to answer. Okay. No, I didn't ask what the mythical character was representing. I was asking which accusation that character is validating. Before you can assassinate someone, you need to make the target look bad. So you need to accuse them of something. You need to destroy someone's image before you actually can destroy the real individual. So first, there's accusation. The accusation leads to contention. The contention causes escalation that turns into assassination. So before assassination, there needs to be accusation. The accusation that George Washington represents is that if people work hard, you should leave them alone. Namely, that if you ask something from the public, you're bothering other people. That's what he's representing. Why? Think about it. In the mythology, they revolted against Britain because Britain was asking taxes from them while they were so-called working hard. So they revolted against it, and George Washington became the hero. So what they wanted in the mythology, people were supposed to be left alone while they work and not ask any more questions. But they won't. But even in the story, it's a bit inconsistent because they fight because they don't want high taxes, but they're willing to endanger their own people with poverty just to achieve it. So then they use the same accusation on their own public. You ask for too much. The same happens in pagan church. In pagan church, there are accusations thrown at you every Sunday. But you often don't realize what the accusation is about. That's why they keep talking about sin, 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 sin. They keep talking about sin. They keep talking about this and that. Always make you feel guilty or unworthy. Why? Because you're put under a spell, and it's then that you can be easily exploited. So what the government does to the masses, the church does to you every Sunday. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when you face backlash for just wanting explanation for things that don't add up around you. That's all. That's been throughout human history. I'm not sure that this was the same era they threw tea in the water. I believe it was because they were looting ships and all of that during that time. So understand the following things. The public will always justify its own crimes by coming up with a mythical character to avenge them. That mythical character either it never existed and they fabricated it based on other people, or the real human being existed, but now they abuse that victim even after that by turning them into an excuse for their violence. So they victimize the victim after that. So what do you do about this? You see through it. And that's why I tell you one thing: stop expecting an apology from the public. It will never come. The public will always escalate in playing the victim, just so they don't have to take responsibility. That's how it always has been. This whole idea that adults out there are adults is a hoax. Most of the adults out there just want to flee. Yet they call you childish when you want to get away from bad situations. The public will never apologize. So never expect it from them. They will always come with some modern day mythology to justify what they did to you or what they did to other people. Always. And every country out there has its mythology. Now, there are countries that did fight to be free, like Haiti and some other places. But when you look at it, the real fights for freedom are hidden. Because most people that I've spoken to never heard about the Haitian Revolution or how it affected the rest of human history. Never. They never were told how the Haitian Revolution even affected the United States. And that the whole Louisiana Purchase only happened as an impact of the Haitian Revolution. You hear about Lewis and Clark and their expedition, but they never explain to you exactly why the United States ended up having to purchase the Louisiana territory from Spain. So the real authentic fights for freedom out there from the victimized, those ones are never talked about. Even in Asia, you had several populations that fought back against tyranny, but they are never spoken about. The world will never endorse real histories of people that fought back against evil. They will never promote that. The only revolutions they'll promote are the fake ones that they've made up. That's why the Haitian Revolution is unknown to many. They never talk about it in school. But the American Revolution is promoted everywhere, including the French revolutions. Because those revolutions are the revolutions they make up to justify the riots and the lynchings that were going on back then, which were out of control. So don't let mythology run you. Because when mythology runs you, you end up participating in the pattern of victimization of your ancestors or the ancestors of the country you live in. Okay. So are there any questions about this subject? Let me know in the live chat now. Thank you very much. Joe, I admit, sometimes it's a bit hard to process your history, but it has to happen so that you can be freed from it. So, okay. If there are no any questions, I'm going to close down the live stream. Please reflect back on what I said in this live stream. Take notes, learn from it, and don't be trapped by the mythical characters the society around you endorses and pushes on you. Be at peace.